Trey Yingst is there live for us. So, Trey, seems to be some breaking developments at this hour. What are you hearing?
Sandra, absolutely. A lot of breaking developments this evening out of Ukraine. The important underlying point to remember here is that nothing is certain in war. There's a lot of information going out from the Russians right now, a lot of information going out from the Ukrainians. But what we know is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared a national day of unity on Wednesday, the 16th of this month. And he's going to be actually raising the salaries for Ukrainian troops temporarily. And he is calling on people here in Ukraine to come together amid this threat of a Russian invasion. But remember, everyone in this conflict has to speak to their civilians and their people. And that's exactly what Zelensky is trying to do. I actually talked with the president over the weekend when he was visiting some Ukrainian National Guard drills near Crimea. And I really pressed him on this idea of intelligence and what information he has seen from the Americans and whether or not he disagrees with those assessments from the Biden administration. And at first, he was quite cagey with the information. He was sort of trying to dodge the question. But when we really drilled down into it, he said what he really thought. And he thinks there is different information out there. He has not really been convinced by that Western intelligence. And we've seen a real sense of calm here in Kyiv and across Ukraine. We were extremely close to the border with Crimea, an area of land that was taken over by the Russians in 2014. It was annexed by President Putin, and we didn't see any troops. We didn't see tanks. We didn't see what you would expect to see ahead of a military invasion, despite the reports that it will take place on Wednesday. So it's important to kind of step back from the brink here and look at this from a 30,000-foot view. And the reality is no one knows what is going to happen. But as we do know, Ukrainian President Zelensky says he's been told Wednesday is the date, and he's trying to bring the Ukrainian people together ahead of that potential invasion. Sandra, Trace?
Okay, it is 9:19 p.m. on the ground there in Kyiv. Trey, could I just follow up on that for a quick second? You have been reporting how the people there in the cities just continue to live life, that restaurants are filled, people are going to the bars, they're going out, the young people are stylish and out, and they continue to enjoy life. I know I spoke to Lucas Tomlinson about it, and he said he talks to the people when they're out in the evening hours, and they said, we have to live our life. Are you still getting a sense of life carrying on as usual in the cities there?
Absolutely. We came across a protest today that had nothing to do with the current tension in the region. It was a group of students protesting the education minister for an internal political issue related to universities. And they were dancing and shouting in the streets of Kyiv, really not bothered by the potential of a Russian invasion. And we are seeing similar scenes of people going about their normal lives throughout the city in restaurants, shops, and bars. People really just ignoring the news and the headlines that we are seeing about the possibility of a Russian invasion. When we've asked civilians here in Kyiv why they feel that way, they say, look, we have been at war with Russia for 8 years, and they continue to hear these headlines in the media in Ukraine, and they continue to hear the messaging from Moscow. They know who Vladimir Putin is. They are very familiar with the political viewpoint of the Russian government. And they say they're basically not bothered by what many have described as saber rattling. And remember, when you look at Vladimir Putin, this is a man who in the past called the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. He sees the Ukrainian and Russian people as one and the same. The young Ukrainians that we spoke to in the streets today say that is not the case anymore. They see themselves as sovereign, and they want a future that does not involve constant threat from Russia. And that's basically why I think even if there is not an invasion on Wednesday, you will see people in the streets of Kyiv, as we've seen in the past over the weekend, demonstrating against the idea of war with Russia. They want to be left alone and continue their lives. And that's the sentiment that we hear from the Ukrainian people.
On that point, Trey, I'd like to kind of bring about that because you talk about saber rattling and President Zelensky, and we know that in recent weeks, President Zelensky has, you know, for all intents and purposes, he has kind of scolded other nations that are trying to gin this up with their news media, saying they're trying to create hysteria. He's tried to keep things very calm, but at the same time, he sends out this notice today saying the attack could happen in 2 days. Isn't that kind of breaking with the position that he has held for the past couple of weeks? And isn't he himself kind of ginning up the scare a bit there?
Well, Trace, that's exactly right. It's certainly different messaging from the Ukrainian president than we've seen over the past several weeks. But it is important to remember Ukraine says many things publicly, and then they take actions behind the scenes privately. And that has happened with this situation very clearly. We saw over the past several weeks the Ukrainians saying they do not believe Russia intends to invade their country, but they've also been asking for military aid from NATO countries, specifically the United States. And we saw that $200 million package approved by President Biden. And those weapons are still landing here in Kyiv this week. Just yesterday, more weapons landed in the Ukrainian capital, and also weapons from countries like Lithuania, anti-aircraft missiles, those Javelin anti-tank missiles. These weapons are now in the hands of the Ukrainian military, and they do intend to use them if a Russian invasion begins. And it's a big if. But if that does happen, it's going to be an extremely bloody conflict. There's a lot of concern about what could take place in the days after an invasion. And we heard the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, talking about this. He spoke of the possibility of the capital, Kyiv, where we are standing right now, having multiple days of aerial bombardment. People have not been prepared for this level of conflict in many cases for decades. And some people who are living here, the younger population, they've just never seen something like we're seeing today. Trey, Sandra?
Safe to say that. Trey Yingst, thank you for your reporting on the ground there.